Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Sodor Streets and Statues. My name is Oliver Duck, call me Ted, and let's get into today's episode, the Tidmouth, Knapford and Elsbridge Railway. Before we start, I would like to introduce the series a little bit. The idea for the series has been around for several years. After Skype calls with friends, they recommended I create a proper lecture series on the subject. I was hesitant at first, but eventually plans were underway, and when the group got together to start back community radio a year ago, I proposed the story and proposed the subject for this podcast, and the team agreed. However, I was a bit busy for the past year, and even though developments were made, I can only properly execute this feat now. I am very happy to be doing so. This series is to help communicate to people kind of the hidden and hard to get to lore of Sodor, based on the book People, History, and Railways by the Reverend Audrey. Today's topic takes us to Knapford firstly, to look at the development of this namesake town for this railway. Knapford sits at the mouth of the River Els. And because of this, and because of the local geography, the valley between Elsbridge and Knapford had a tendency to flood, both at high tide and during large times of the river's flow. This caused the whole community to be unsuited for building anything of foundation, farming, and mining. This is why, in the 1880s, the English company A.W. Dry came to the area to set up operations to drain the Vinland swamps and create prosperous communities, farms, towns, and mines. And this is why there's a certain Englishness to the names and culture of the town, because of this development bringing in so many outsiders to do the work of creating this whole valley, basically, from the sea. It got underway in the 1880s, with the first floodgates being built. Additionally, large water reservoirs were made on the opposing bank of the River Els to where we know today the towns of Torreyreck and Dry are to be. This is because they needed a place for the water to pool during high tide before it could be drained back out, and were unable to drain the entire wetlands, as this would be unattainable to achieving the drainage goal with 1880s technology. The Ulstead Mining Company was interested in the sites to develop a lead mine between Dry and Torreyreck, but those towns didn't even exist in this time. Those towns firstly had to be dried out, the salt bleached from the soil, and the farms set up to allow them to start to be built and eventually grow to village status as we know them today. In this time, a tramway was built from Elsbridge to Knapford to carry mine goods and other products along the valley and assist with the general efforts. And this time, the traction method was horse, but this was not to be its destiny forever. In parallel to this, A.W. Dry & Co. set up shop in Tidmouth. By convincing the locals by some sweet talking and by selling them some local boats that they had built for the Tidmouth's thriving fishing industry, A.W. Dry was able to secure the harbour to gain shipments in and out of the community for its work on building. However, this was done through horse and buggies, drawn along the coast before it reached Knapford before transferred onto that tramway. So, in 1905, they decided to extend the tramway all the way out to Tidmouth along a coastal route. However, as one could imagine, a railway built on the edge of the coast didn't last very long, especially due to the shoddy engineering of the time. Where can a railway find a better engineer to do better work on building a railway on the island of Sodor? But none other than Mr. Hat. Mr. Hat, who had come to the island to work for A.W. Dry & Co. in Tidmouth in 1901, had previously worked in Swindon Works on the Great Western Railway. Taking up the position of the head engineer of the line, he spearheaded the project to develop a new tunnel to connect Tidmouth and Knapford, as well as the project to build steam power locomotives to run this new line. These locomotives, by Sir Topham Hatt's design, were little vertical boiler locomotives Nicknamed by many coffee pots, as their vertical boilers kind of resemble a coffee pot. They worked the line for many years before eventually being scrapped in favor of larger traction. Thomas. But let's not jump ahead of ourselves. This venture helped ease the suffering of the local communities at the time, which largely consisted of out-of-work miners and other employees of the local area that were put out of work by this railway closing. The first train to run from Knapford to Tidmouth was in 1910. And in 1912, an exciting event happened for the little railway that finally had steam services all the way from Elsbridge to Tidmouth and was finally starting to prosper. It amalgamated with the Wellsworth and Suddery Railway. The second railway we're going to be talking about today is the Wellsworth and Suddery. This line, surprise, surprise, connected the towns of Wellsworth to Suddery in 1870. Additionally, it had a station in Crosby, beyond Wellsworth. The goal of the line was to connect the industrial centres of Wellsworth and Crosby to a harbour, notably Suddery. They initially tried to develop a harbour in this town, which is the capital of Sodor. Since it's the capital, however, and throughout history there has been conflict. During the English Civil War, parliamentarian troops blew up the local castle, which was held by royalists at the time, causing debris to fall into the ocean nearby. And this is the site where they attempted to. Because of this, only small ships can use the harbour. Any ship with a large displacement caused it to run aground. To try to alleviate this, the extension was built in the early 1900s to Brendam to hopefully find a better place to have a harbour. A few jetties were made and local fishermen were pretty happy about it. However, this again proved not fruitful and didn't really pan out. So this railway too was looking for a new harbour, pretty similar to the nearby Knapford and Elsbridge Railway at the time. Additionally, this line was run by 4 060 tank engines. It's unknown details about these engines, much more than they arrived roughly in 1870. Heck, some of them could have arrived later. And much else about it. All we know that they ended up on the line and were some of the first rostered locomotives, eventually to go on to the later Northwest Railway. However, before we can talk about the Northwest Railway, we have to talk about when the Wellsworth and Suddery merged with the Tidmouth, Knapford, and Elsbridge. Because of the problems we were discussing about the port of Brendam, we had a station which the purpose was to conduct industrial centres with a harbour, who had no harbour. Another small railway without motive power and without much more than a coffee pot, but a great harbour location, and secured a tunnel through one of the geographies. So it was agreed in 1912 that the two lines would merge and connect Tidmouth to the already established railway in Crosby and the rest of the line. This work was eventually completed, and locomotives started to run and act as the services. But this merger was short-lived, because, as we'll discuss in our next episodes, in 1914, these two railways were combined with the Sodor mainland to form the Northwestern Railway. Thank you very much for listening to the first episode. If you have any questions or requests for certain topics to be covered, please leave it in the comments. I look forward to covering the more obscure parts of the history and help explain things for viewers who want to learn. That's all from me for now.